The first time she said it, the wind was lifting dust off the Apache Ranch road and the late sun was turning the hills the color of old copper. And Jonah Red Hawk thought he had misheard her because the world had trained him to expect bargains and betrayals, not vows spoken so simply. She stood there with her hat clutched to her chest, eyes steady despite the tremor in her hands, and said, "I will have your baby," not as a plea and not as a trap, but as a truth she had carried across miles of loss, and the words landed between them like a seed dropped into hard ground, needing patience and faith to break through. Jonah was a man raised on patience, born Apache, taught by his grandfather that land remembers every step and every promise, and that love is not the fire that flares but the coal that holds heat through the night. He had built his ranch with scarred hands and quiet mornings, had learned to listen to cattle breathe and storms think, and he had learned, through a marriage that ended in silence and a child he never held, to guard his heart the way a rider guards water in the desert. She was Clara Whitmore, widow of a surveyor who never came back from the hills, a woman with dust on her boots and resolve in her spine, who had crossed into his life asking for work and stayed because the land answered her, because Jonah answered her without trying to, because kindness can feel like gravity when you've floated too long alone. The ranch had changed around them in small, honest ways. Mornings where she beat him to the stove and evenings where they counted stars instead of debts, the sound of her laugh stitching itself into the creak of the barn, the way Jonah's horse leaned into her palm as if recognizing family. And still Jonah had told himself that some things were not meant to be named, that companionship was a safe bridge while love was a river in flood. When she spoke that vow, the river rose. He saw everything at once, the child's feet running the fence line, the hard questions the town would ask, the old wounds in him that still bled when pressed, and he felt the weight of history, of bloodlines and borders, of promises broken by men who looked like him and men who didn't, and he almost stepped back into the safety of silence. But the wind carried her words again, gentler now as she added that she loved him, that the baby was hope and not leverage, that she would not bind him with it if he did not choose her freely. And Jonah understood then that courage sometimes looks like staying still and letting the truth hit you square in the chest. He told her about the son he lost before breath, about the fear that love always demands payment, and she listened without fixing him, which is its own kind of mercy, and she said she knew loss too and still believed in building again, plank by plank, morning by morning. The ranch bore witness as they decided together, not with ceremony but with work. Mending a fence where lightning had split a post, planting beans where the soil was stubborn, sharing stories by firelight until the past loosened its grip, and Jonah felt his heart, that old guarded thing, begin to open the way land opens after rain, slowly, with a sound only those who listen can hear. Town talk came like it always does, sharp as burrs, but Jonah rode into it with Clara at his side, and when men measured him with old prejudice he met their eyes without flinching, and when women whispered about her he held her hand so the whole street could see, because love, he had learned, is sometimes an answer you give out loud. Seasons turned, Clara's belly rounded, and Jonah learned the new language of anticipation. The carefulness with which he lifted feed sacks, the way he counted her breaths when storms rattled the windows, the quiet prayers he spoke to ancestors and stars alike. He sang to the child in Apache at dusk, a song about rivers finding the sea, and Clara cried without knowing why, and Jonah knew then that the child had already braided them together more tightly than fear ever could. When the day came, it came fast and bright, the sky washed clean by rain, and the ranch hands moved like a practiced choir, and Jonah stood at the threshold of the room holding Clara's strength with both of his, discovering that love can be fierce and tender in the same heartbeat. When the baby's cry finally cut the air, something ancient and gentle broke open inside him, and he wept not for what he had lost but for what he had found. He held his child, felt the small weight settle into his arms like a promise kept, and Clara looked at him with a smile that had weathered everything, and Jonah gave her his heart the way a man gives land to spring. Not all at once, but completely trusting growth to do the rest. In the months that followed, the ranch thrived not because the world had softened but because they had, together. Jonah taught his child the names of winds and stars, Clara taught them letters and laughter, and the fences stood straighter because hands that work in love learn a better measure. If this story stirred something in you, the courage to choose, the patience to build, the faith to love, then stay with us, subscribe to the channel, and ride along for more stories where hearts find home in wide open places. because every promise worth keeping begins with listening, and every journey is richer when you don't walk it alone.